We're joined by Senator Tom Cotton. Good morning, sir.
Hey, Kevin. Good morning to you.
Good morning. A very difficult day for the country yesterday, and especially those affected in Las Vegas. Your thoughts on what happened there?
It was a terrible tragedy, Kevin. I see so many people killed and wounded, and I think now it's the appropriate time for mourning and grieving while investigators and police officers and detectives and FBI agents continue to do the work together, all the facts so we can understand the circumstances of the shooting.
Senator, as you look at what happened, and I don't want to get into the gun debate at all, I want to get your thought on this particular question. Whether you agree or not, the debate on gun control is going to come up at some point. Your thoughts in that I have to be trained to do almost anything of significance, be that drive a car or a truck or a forklift or to be a plumber or electrician, anything that could harm another person, I've got to be pretty well licensed to do. Even hunter education, if I want to take my kids in the woods. Why not for somebody that has an automatic weapon?
Well, Kevin, I think it's important to be precise in terms. Semi-automatic rifles can discharge one round with one pull of the trigger. An automatic weapon can discharge an unlimited number of rounds, limited only by the ammunition and by the heat of the barrel with one pull of the trigger. Automatic weapons like machine guns have been very strictly regulated in this country for 80 years. They've been nearly prohibited for 30 years. We still don't, to my knowledge, understand exactly the kinds of weapons he used and how he used them. You know, I heard some of those videos that were on TV yesterday, and it sounded to me like a belt-fed machine gun, which again is exceptionally rare to have in the United States. It's hard to get the machine gun, hard to get the linked ammunition. So before we answer any of those questions, I think we need to know exactly how he obtained the weapons that he did in fact use, and some of the other circumstances around the shooting.
Senator Tom Cotton, News Radio 102.9 KARN. It has been U.S. Embassy personnel that the U.S. has withdrawn from Cuba, and your thoughts on that?
We have many Americans who are serving in Havana and now have serious and probably lifelong injuries from a mysterious set of circumstances. They've got traumatic brain injury and hearing loss and other conditions that we're not sure they'll recover from. And whether this was the Cuban government's efforts to harass our personnel in our embassy, or they were not taking seriously their responsibility to protect our personnel, as every nation does for any other country's diplomatic personnel, then I don't think we can put American lives at risk. I frankly don't think the agreement that President Obama struck with Cuba was very good either, so I certainly don't want to put American personnel at risk in Havana under those conditions.
Certainly. It's very beneficial to our state, though, Senator, to have that market open in Cuba for our agricultural products. Your thought on that, and how does that affect that situation?
Well, ultimately, we have to look at our interests in the whole, and most of the money that goes into Cuba today through trade is not going into the hands of the Cuban people. It's going into the hands of the Cuban government. And that money is being used to undermine the United States and our security and the safety of our people, as we just saw in Havana. Much of this I can't discuss, Kevin, but I would just assure all your listeners that Cuba is one of the most anti-American regimes in the world.
Why can't it be discussed?
It's classified information. Okay. You know, Cuba is a police state and a security state, and what they do to undermine the United States and the kind of espionage and subterfuge in which they engage in the United States is much more widespread than I imagine most people would think.
Senator Tom Cotton, News Radio 102.9 KARN. The Congress taking up tax reform. How do you think this should look?
I think it should look like lower tax bills for most Arkansans.
Well, we're going to hope, yeah, exactly. But
look, our tax code is really not competitive in the world. We have way too many businesses that are moving overseas, not just moving a factory, but moving themselves entirely overseas, or businesses that are opening overseas. You know, the London Stock Exchange has had more initial stock offerings for new companies than American stock exchanges has had for years. That's a direct result of a tax system that takes too much money out of the pockets of Americans and our businesses, and a regulatory system that places too many burdens on us. That's ultimately bad for Arkansans, not only because they pay too much in taxes themselves, but also because it's bad for job creation.
Kevin Miller with Senator Tom Cotton, News Radio 102.9 KARN. Critics of the tax plan and the lack of details about what is happening here, they're saying that this is just a gift to the rich. Is it going to help lower and middle class Americans too?
Well, Kevin, you made a good point there. Those critics are being mutually inconsistent. They're claiming to know how the general framework announced last week will impact everyone but they're also claiming not to have enough details to make that assessment. So last week we got more details about a framework, but we don't have a bill yet, and sooner rather than later, the tax writing committees in Congress are going to be sitting down and they're going to have a bill, and we're going to see what's going to happen for most people in America. And that's the way I'm going to be making my judgment. I want to see working families in Arkansas get tax relief. There's ways you can do that. You can lower the rates. You can double the deduction. You can increase the child tax credit. So there's lots of ways that you can try to get more more money in the pockets of Arkansas families. But for that to know all that, we still have to wait a little bit longer before we start drafting legislation. That's how Congress is supposed to work.
Senator Tom Cotton, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
747 News Radio 102.9 KARN.